everyone. Welcome to Unmasked, where things are discovered, uncovered, brought to the light, and made known. I'm your host, Lamar Barrett, coming live to you from PG County, Maryland. If you're interested in finding out about the untold stories behind being a college coach, this is the show for you. Being a former assistant men's college basketball coach for 16 years, there are so many untold stories behind the scenes in the life of a college basketball coach. Now, let's unmask them. Today's guest is a longtime assistant, a great friend and mentor in the business, and a Washington, D.C. native, Chris Cheeks. Let me talk about Chris Cheeks a little bit before we bring him on to the show. Chris Cheeks is, like I said, Washington, D.C. native, went on and played, finished up his career at Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU in Richmond, Virginia. From there, after playing a couple of stops, professional basketball, he went coach high school basketball for 3 years, and then he went back to his alma mater, 1995, coaching at VCU. Was there for 5 seasons. From there, went on to West Virginia for a couple of seasons, down to Georgia State in Atlanta for 3 seasons, to Charlotte with Bobby Lutz from 06 to 2010. Took a year off, worked with DC Assault with Curtis Malone and them for a year, for a couple of summers. And then he went on to Delaware, where he actually ended up winning, going to the NCAA tournament, along with other stops along the way. He's been to the NCAA tournament, did a great job at Delaware. And then he did a year at Western Kentucky. And then he's been the last 3 years now at Boston College. And I want to say, Chris Cheeks, like I said, a longtime assistant, 25 years in the business. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you for allowing me to come on to your show, and, good luck with your show. I'm sure that there's a million assistant coaches in the Washington, D.C. area, and also D.C. alums who would obviously do a terrific job on your show, Lamar.
I'm going to try to get as many guys as I can to come on the show. I think it's stories that can be told, and also a platform for some great, assistant coaches, as well as down the road, some head coaches. But, Chris, with that being said, you know what? Let's get unmasked.
Okay.
The first thing I always say is, there's no handbook to being a college coach. I think basketball and maybe being a car salesman are probably the 2 jobs that I can remember. No one tells you, there's no training. You just, there's no training. You just, you start and you work. Tell me about your first day, your first week, first month after things are done with human resources, especially when no one gives you any direction.
Well, I can tell you vividly from my first day at VCU, I went from human resources right to the Franklin Street gym and started sweeping the floor to get ready for practice. Because back then you didn't have a million managers and you didn't have all the video coordinator guys. It was just, skeleton crew. So nobody told me, okay, you had to do X or A or B. I just jumped in as an assistant coach and, started sweeping the floor to, because the floor back then, the floor was really slippery. We were in an old gym, and it was 100 degrees in the gym, and we had 2 big fans on both ends of the gym. And, guys, that's what we had to do. We had to put towels on each end of the floor. And when guys fall down, the assistant coach had to grab those towels if it wasn't a manager available, and you had to get right in there and get dirty and wipe the floor up. So I've done every job that you can imagine in college basketball. Like I said, when I started at VCU, just coming fresh from playing and coaching, actually, my first 3 years I was a high school coach, and, a lot of young guys always, send me emails, and, when they see me on the road, they say, well, how did you get started? And I tell everybody, I started as my first job was a freshman. I was the freshman coach at Atlee High School in Mechanicsville, Virginia, right outside of Richmond. Then my second year, I was the JV coach. And then my third year, I became the varsity coach. And then my fourth year coaching, I left and went to VCU and became assistant coach at VCU. So I literally came in the hard way. And, you know, people look back at my career and they're like, well, how did you get so lucky? The grace of God, you know, that was God, you know, showing me the way, and he paved the way for me. So I've been fortunate ever since.
That's awesome, man. Especially, I remember the Franklin Street gym, so I can remember those days of like it being hot and you know, sweaty in there. So I definitely remember those days.
Oh yeah,
Um,
anybody who was assistant coach back then or head coach back when Tony Squire used to have his big AAU tournament there. I mean, I used to have to get there at 7 a.m. and open the gym up for them, and you know, let those guys get ready for the AAU tournament.
wow. So, what was your best and worst recruiting story? You've been in it for a long time now, Cheek. So, what's your best and worst recruiting story?
Probably my best story is, oh gosh, it's so many. I got so many stories, but probably the best one was going down to working at VCU, going down to Mount Zion and watching Mount Zion play. And when I get down there, you know, Joel Hopkins is the head coach, and he tells me, "Hey, coach, meet me at the gas station." So I meet him at the gas station, and I follow him. I follow him to his player's house, which was around the corner, and we go around there, and you know, I get to the house, and he's trying to load up the van, and when he's trying to load up the van, because they have a game being played, so they're loading the van up, and as they're loading the van up, three of the guys walking down the street. They're walking in the middle of the street, and I can vividly see these guys. And I'm like, wait a minute, are these guys like smoking? They're walking towards me, and they're smoking marijuana. And I don't want to say who the guys are, because one of the guys has been unbelievably successful in basketball. And I'm like, I'm trying not for these guys to see me, but I'm right behind the player's van. And I'm just waiting because, you know, the coach is trying to load the guys up on the van. And I'm like, I'm just shaking my head. I'm a young guy. I'm young. I'm young, and, you know, really, you know, this is like one of my first experiences out recruiting. And, you know, the guys, they all get in the van. And when they get in the van, first, Coach Hopkins takes them to a football field. He takes the guys to the football field because he didn't tell me at the time he hasn't seen these three guys in like 2 days. So they go to the football field, and then he started running the whole team. They just start running up these steps over at Duke University. They start going up the football steps, and they just running and running. They're running for like 40 minutes. And I'm sitting there with Coach, and then he tells me, man, these guys haven't been around for 2 days, and, you know, they think they just gonna run over me. That ain't happening. So then they finish running. Then we proceed to drive to the gym, and, you know, they start practicing. And when they start practicing, Lamar, I'm looking at Coach Hopkins, and I was a pretty good player. And I looked at him and I said, man, you might have about four NBA prospects on this team. I mean, when they got on the court, I was like, oh, wow. I mean, you talking about guys putting their elbow over the rim, dunking. The warm-up line was like nothing like I've ever seen. No team, since I saw that one particular team, no team has ever duplicated the warm-up line that this team implemented that day. It was unbelievable. I was like, this is the best team that I'm probably going to ever see in my coaching career. And, you know, they had Tracy McGrady, they had Stoudemire. I mean, they had some dudes on that team. And I was like,
Wow.
wow. I mean, so that was probably the best recruiting story. And we ended up getting the one kid, Brian Williams, who was on that team. He didn't even start. Brian Williams could jump over, like, you could put two guys up under the basket and he'd jump right over top of you. That's how high of a jumper he was. He was like a 7-foot high jumper. But he didn't even start on this particular team. And I'm at VCU and I'm thinking, wow, we get this kid, we got something. And then we end up getting Antonio Hargrove, another kid off that team. And that's how much talent they had on that particular team. But probably one of my worst stories was at Western Kentucky. And I'm going in to fly into New Orleans. And we just get to Western Kentucky, and I fly in, and I called the guy I'm supposed to go see. I called his coach. I called the coach first. Coach never responded to me. Now, mind you, the night before, I talked to the coach like an hour on the phone. So the guy never responds. So then I called the kid. The kid never responds. Then I call the dad. The dad never responds. Now, I'm in New Orleans at the time, and all I'm trying to do now is just find out where I'm supposed to meet them at to watch the kid work out. And nobody ever responds, Lamar. For one whole day, I just flew into New Orleans. They never respond. Nobody in the whole organization responded. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man. This is pissing me off now because I got a 6 a.m. flight to go somewhere else the next morning. So I can't even, if I don't get it done tonight, if I don't see the kid play tonight, I'm not going to see him play. Sure enough, I go to sleep, get on my flight the next morning. Here comes the calls. They all start calling me. The family, the father, the kid, they're like, "Oh, coach, we missed your call. We were out." I'm like, "Man, you got to be kidding me." I just sat in the freaking hotel just waiting for you. I never left my hotel because I'm just waiting for the phone call. And that was probably my worst recruiting trip ever. And
you hate them. You hate them right there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because I just spent the whole day for nothing. What I'm going to tell coach? I didn't see the kid. But
I guess
we all, as assistant coaches, we all have experienced trips like that.
I totally agree with you. Those are two very good stories. Like I love them. Next thing, like, what did you have to give up achieving your current level of success?
It was a lot of my spare time because, as you know, being an assistant coach in college, you really don't have any spare time because, like, I used to like to play basketball all the time, and I never found myself playing because when I went home, everything was family time, my kids, my wife. So I had to give up like playing basketball, and that probably was like for me the worst thing ever because I played every day.
Yeah, and that's what people don't understand. Like, Cheeks, like this job is, I don't know if anyone else works like us, like 355 to 360 days out the year. You don't get a chance to, you don't have those family times. Like, like Christmas, you get 3 days off. You back at school. You're, when it's time for you to go on vacation, you really got to take it in last week in May or like in August sometime. And then even when you're on vacation, you're still like setting up visits, kids to come to campus. So like you're still on your phone and stuff talking. So like, and like I said, 15 hours a day, 12, 15 hours a day, you working. If you got scouting reports, all of that stuff. So, I mean, I can understand, like you said it, basketball, you give up family. There's a lot of stuff, man, that you got to give up to achieve success.
Well, I can just tell you last year being on vacation and And I'm looking over at my wife. We're sitting on the beach in Aruba, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just texting this kid because his family is coming here next week, and I wanted to make sure they go to such and such restaurant because we experienced the same thing. And I just wanted to have something to tell the kid." You know, she was like, "Put the phone away. We're on vacation." But, you know, you got to slide it in, you know, whenever you can.
I totally agree with you. You got to do that. You know what I'm saying? Yep. You have to. What was your, now this was what people don't understand either. You know, coaches do these scout reports. Everyone has a scout report. You can usually share them with the staff. Sometimes you can do your best scout report and have your worst game. Sometimes you do your worst scout report, like you don't even have all the stuff you thought you had, and you ended up beating the team by 25-30. Like, what was your best and worst scouting report?
Well, my best scouting report probably was when I was at the University of Delaware, and my very first game we played in preseason NIT, and Virginia was my scout. And, you know, obviously Virginia being a juggernaut in the ACC, that was my very first scout. And we won the game. So I would consider that probably my best scout because when we won, we advanced to Madison Square Garden to play in the Final Four of the NIT. And I remember vividly the guy from the NIT, 15 minutes before the game, he's telling me, "Hey, man, well, we got you guys going. When y'all leave here, you guys going to be heading to Ohio to play," I want to say it was like Kent State, as opposed to going to New York, because he had already penciled us in as a loss to Virginia. Uh-huh. And I just remember looking at the guy walking in the handshake line, and sorry, man, we messed your plans up. So that was probably my best scout. And probably my worst scout was losing to Western Kentucky when I here at Boston College in the NIT.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a tough one, especially after you had left there.
Yeah, I had just left, and I knew all the plays, and and I remember looking back at the game and just saying, man, Jerome and Kai played awful. And they had such phenomenal years leading into that game. And, both now look back, they both in the NBA. And when they went to play Western Kentucky, they were so disappointed because we didn't make the NCAA tournament. And they really wanted to be in the NCAA tournament. And going to Western Kentucky to play them was like totally not what they wanted to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing about it. Like, that people don't understand. That's another story for another day. Like, NCAA, man, everyone is NCAA almost bust a lot of times for these kids. And so when they don't make the NCAA, and it's like, oh, I got to go to NIT. And so, like, you got to pump them up and motivate them just to try to play. These kids don't look at it as you still got more opportunities to play. They just look at it as, man, I'm going to the, like, stepchild tournament.
Let me tell you something. It took everything in our coaching staff power to get Jerome Robinson to play, because you got to remember, Jerome had just lit the ACC up. He was averaging 23 a game, and, everybody they had his name mentioned as a first-round draft pick, and now he got to go to Western Kentucky to play in the NIT. I mean, he did not want to play that game. I'm telling you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in that. I've been through that. Trust me, that's a tough one, man.
Yeah.
Cheeks, what's the biggest challenge you have experienced since you've become a college coach?
The biggest challenge is finding the diamond in the roughs. Everybody can go out and find the top 25 kids, but finding those diamond in the roughs, and I give you one, and this is going into probably one of my best recruiting stories ever. At VCU, there was a kid named Dominic Jones. phenomenal player. He was the CAA Player of the Year, and Dominique had tore it up all summer. And, you know, at VCU, I sit there, me and Coach Smith, we watched every game the kid played. He was a local kid. Now, all of a sudden, here comes like the Notre Dames, the Rutgers, the Seton Halls of the world. And, you know, when those schools came in, and we're sitting there and we're in the CAA, and I'm like, oh boy, here we go. You know, now they're going to, you know, try to knock us out. So now my wife was really upset because every day when I picked my kids up for school, Dominique worked for Dairy Queen. So I took my kids every day to the Dairy Queen where Dominique worked at to get ice cream, just so I can lay eyes on the kid and say hi to him. And, you know, a lot of people, you know, that's what you had to do, you know, to beat the ACC and the Big East and the Big Ten at the time. You know, you had to go the extra mile, and that was going the extra mile for me, taking my kids to this Dairy Queen every day and going home from there. My kids going crazy when we get home because now they just had ice cream. when they supposed to be winding down a little bit. But it all worked out because, you know, the kid came and he was the Player of the Year in the Colonial.
Awesome. I'm sure they love you for life for that one, for the ice cream. Trust me.
Yeah.
Now, do you ever find there are things about you that people misunderstand? Like, you know, what are they? Anything that you think like people misunderstand about you?
Well, like I give you an example. When I coached at VCU, you know, I was a young coach who had just finished playing at VCU, and everybody looked at me as Chris Cheeks, the player, not Chris Cheeks, the coach. And that was probably the biggest reason I left VCU, because nobody looked at me as a coach, and they never gave me credit for being a coach. You know, what kind of basketball mind do I have? So that was probably the number one reason I left and went to West Virginia.
Wow. Okay. Now, this is interesting. We're all educators. You know, we're always teaching. I don't think people understand that. Like, one of the biggest things I always say, Cheeks, is like when a kid comes to campus, their parents are ready to drop them off. And I'm like, you know, you've done a great job of rearing your kids for 18, 19, 20 years of their life. I never say raise. We've raised cattle. We don't raise kids. So I always say rearing kids. I always say, look, you've done a great job. Now it's my job or our job to go from young boy or young man to a grown man, because these 4 or 5 years are going to be the most important years of their life. They're learning how to be a man now. They're out on their own. So you want to teach them things of how to become a man, not just the basketball thing. So what would you try to teach your players, or what do you teach your players besides basketball?
Well, first of all, I try to teach each young man that I recruit or each young man that I coach. I want them to be respectful, because you never know who's watching you when they're watching you. And I tell them, and I give them different stories, and I say, you know, everywhere you go is your interview for life. So you have to conduct yourself as if you want that job when you finish playing. So when you're at the club or you're in a restaurant and a little kid walk up to you and ask you for an autograph, and you tell a little kid, man, go away. I don't have time for you. You never know who that little kid is. That little kid dad could be the CEO of some company. The little kid's dad could be working for the Washington Bullets. You just don't know.
Right.
And that's why I tell every kid, you know, be respectful everywhere you are. You could be on a plane. I mean, you could be walking through an airport. Somebody speak to you. Always speak back. you know, and it could be the most uncomfortable, you know, time in your life. I remember, and I tell every kid, I just remember getting cut from the Philadelphia 76ers and flying back from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. It was the worst flight ever in my life. I mean, I was so dejected, and this old lady, she was probably in her 70s, sitting next to me, and I looked over to the old lady and I said, I don't really want to talk right now. And I just slept for the entire trip because I was, you know, inside I was crying. I was still crying, and, you know, I had never been cut.
Right.
You know, I was always a successful basketball player, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And when I got off the plane, I just remember going to the old lady and I said, I apologize for not talking on the plane, but I just got released from the Philadelphia 76ers and I didn't know how to deal with it. And the old lady grabbed my hand and said, young man, believe in God. God got you. Whatever you do in life, you're going to be successful. And ever since then, I changed the way I look at, you know, life. And because of what that old lady said to me.
That's awesome. I say it all the time, Cheeks. I'm like you. You're always being evaluated. Always being evaluated. You never know, you know, who's looking. That's some great advice right there to the young kids. What are your best and worst memories in coaching?
Oof. Well, the worst memory is playing in the Colonial Tournament, and we're in the second round, and we're playing James Madison. And I just remember being up. I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. That's probably my second worst experience. My first experience being assistant coach, my second year at Georgia State. In the second round, we're playing Troy State at the time, and we're playing in Nashville. The tournament was in Nashville, and you know we're favored to win the whole tournament. We go up 20. We're up 20 in the second half. 10 minutes left in the game. So about 4 minutes left in the game, we're still up 18. We start subbing guys out because we're thinking about tomorrow, championship game tomorrow. So, hey man, we need to rest some of these guys. And Troy State went on an unbelievable run to win the game, Lamar. And I just remember sitting in the locker room after the game. I couldn't even sit on the bleachers. I was just sitting in a corner, like with a towel over my head and just like hand over my head and just like, I can't believe this. We just lost. We were up 20 points with 4 minutes left in the game, and Troy State comes back to win it. And then the next day, Troy State wins the whole tournament. I mean, you're talking about dejected. The bus ride back to Georgia State, oh my gosh. Whew. So that's probably
that had to be brutal.
Probably one of my highest moments when I saw Jerome Robinson and his family at the NBA draft. Just from where Jerome came from to where he ended up was probably the biggest moment, because to me as a coach, it is so satisfying to see a young man who had everybody in high school had like said, this kid, he's not good enough. And the kid comes to Boston College and now the kid is playing in the NBA. That was probably my best story.
I like that. Raleigh, right? Kid from Raleigh.
North Carolina.
Yes, sir.
Went to Brockton High School, played on the same high school team as Mark Godfrey's kids. Used to go swim over at Mark Godfrey's house, and, you know, nobody in North Carolina wanted the kid. And, you know, Boston College Coach Christian believed in him and gave him an opportunity, and the rest is history, you know.
Awesome story, talking about that's a diamond in the rough right there.
Yes.
That's what that is.
Yeah.
Quick question, like what was the most stressful situation you think you faced?
The most stressful was probably when I was trying to recruit Jonathan Hargett when I was at West Virginia. And if I don't, a lot of people don't know the story, but Jonathan's brother, when I was the high school coach at Lee, Jonathan's older brother was my assistant coach. And just trying to keep all the other schools away from Jonathan, you know, the LSUs, the Arizonas of the world, the Kentuckys, and, you know, just to get the kid to come, that was probably like for 3 months was probably the most stressful time in my life, because I knew we could get the kid, but it was going to be 3 months that we had to make sure this kid, you know, stayed on board and was coming to West Virginia. That was the most stressful time of my life, because, you know, every school in the country was coming in and they, you know, hey man, we got 20 pros here, we got 10 pros here. And at West Virginia at the time, it wasn't a lot of pros coming out of there. So the selling point was, hey man, you got to come and let this be your show. You know, you be the biggest star since Jerry West. You know, that's what we were selling. And, you know, you got Arizona. Hey, man, we'll point guard you. You know, every year we've had a point guard go into the NBA. Just, you know, LSU, I think at the time, they were hot and, you know, had won the SEC, and Tennessee was preseason number 4 in the country. So it was just a lot of variables we had to overcome. And that made it stressful.
That's what people don't realize. Like, Jonathan Hargett, like, one of people don't understand how good he was. I just remember watching him, and I remember him from Richmond when he played at high school. Then I remember at National Christian. But he had one of the best performances I ever seen from a high school basketball kid up at Charlie Weber at College Park. That like it was unbelievable. Yep. And like you were saying, like, even though when a kid verbally commit, like that's when they verbally commit, that's the most stressful time you have, because now everybody knows they don't have to beat out one school. So everybody's still like trying to get in somehow to still recruit a kid, even though he's verbally committed. You know what I'm saying? So that's the stressful part.
In that situation, the mom was so committed to West Virginia and me. She believed in me because her oldest son, and she would call me and tell me, hey man, such and such call, he's supposed to be your friend, he's still calling. And I would text the guys and call them, hey man, leave the kid alone, the mom told me to tell you to stop calling, you know. And it kind of put some of my friendships aside, because, hey, you messing with my livelihood now.
Yeah, I've had some of those, trust me.
Oh, yeah.
This is kind of be interesting. It's funny. You've been in it for a while, so you probably have plenty, but you can just, if you can come up with one, like, what is the strangest thing a player has done outside of the basketball court?
Oh, wow. So I believe it was my 3rd year on staff at VCU, and my home phone never rings, and my home phone rang at like 4:00 in the morning, and it startled me. So I pick up the phone, and it's one of my players. He's incarcerated. He's like, Coach, I need you to come bail me out of jail. And I'm like, I know that is illegal, so why you didn't call your parents? He like, if I call my grandmother, she's gonna go crazy on me and you know, try to take me out of VCU. And I told him, I said, well, I will call your grandma, but I can't personally come and get you because if I sign any paperwork, I'm going to get fired. I'm going to lose my job because it's illegal. And that was probably one of the toughest phone calls I ever had, like in the middle of the night. And I'm like, man, there's nothing I can do. I really can't do anything. So I ended up calling his grandmother, and his grandmother ended up coming down. She had to drive down from Washington, D.C. to bail him out. But it was just the rules. I mean, I didn't want to break a rule and lose my job. But
hey, that's what people don't understand. No, like the late night calls is scary, and that's what people don't realize. You're always on the job, man. Like that happens. Like for you people who don't understand that, that's what college coaches go through, and we depend on 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids and plus. That's our livelihood, and that's how we feed our family. And those little things can cost you a job.
But Lamar, you also got to understand, like, when those parents drop those young men off, one of the things that we tell the parents is, you know, he now becomes a part of my family. And for me to not be able to go and bail this kid out of jail was really disheartening for me because I was so close to the kid and his family. But the rules did not allow me to go bail him out.
That's how they are. That's the NCAA. It sets it up for you that way.
That's right.
You know? So, Cheeks, you've been in for a while. I always thought, I'm like, man, why has this guy not been a head coach at this level? But you worked for some really good guys, and I think I mentioned, you know, Sonny Smith was one of them, right? And Bobby Lutz at Charlotte, and
yep.
I mean, with Jimmy Christian now, and I mean, you've worked with, you know, I can't forget, man at Georgia State for a long time. I know that's your guy. Yeah, he was, you know, terrific. So, I mean, you at the level now that you're at the highest level, the ACC. You probably thinking more of AD than anything. Now, if you had a chance to work for anyone in men's college basketball, like who would that be? Like whether it's an AD, you probably know enough of them now, or you've been with Jimmy, and that's why I'm saying AD because I'm thinking head coach. I'm thinking AD level because I'm looking at you as a head coach down the line.
Well, probably the one guy as an AD that I would probably want to work under is Gene Smith up at Ohio State. You know, probably he's probably looked upon as one of the most powerful athletic directors in the country, and he's a guy who can pick up a phone call. He can make a phone call for a young man like myself and get it done just like that, because he's well respected in the business. So he's probably the one guy that I would say that I would look up to and I would want to work for.
Awesome. Gene Smith has done a terrific job at Ohio State.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, what's your – I know you've been to several NCAA tournaments. You've had so many kids come through. Like, your biggest accomplishment you have experienced since you have become – or, you know, since you've been a college coach?
Probably the biggest accomplishment was to win it all at Delaware and the way we won it after the dejection the year before. And just like we rolled through the league. I think we were like 14-1. I think Towson was the only team that beat us in the league. And and then go on and win the tournament as well. In Delaware at the time had never won a CAA championship. And that was, to me, that was probably one of the biggest accomplishments I ever had because the way we did it and where Delaware had came from. Because it was a slow process in terms of the grind and build that program because that program was, whew, I mean, it was way down. And we literally
Cheeks, this is kind of interesting. Just gonna might have you thinking a little bit. What movie or TV show title best describes your work week or your week in general?
You stumped me right there. I would say love and basketball. And the reason I would say love and basketball is because how much I love basketball and how much I love my wife. So, you know, a lot of our conversations at the dinner table is about basketball. And, you know, when we're talking about our family, and, you know, it's always basketball. And, you know, sometimes like my wife, she come down in the basement, I'm down in the basement, and she'll see basketball on. She won't even bother me because she know my love for basketball. So I would say love and basketball.
That's a pretty good answer. Great answer. You've been in a long time. You probably picked up this things here and there. What's your favorite word or phrase? That's like, you know, you coaching the players, you might be saying something or something to them anyway, but like, what's your favorite word or phrase?
Gangster. Because
Gangster.
Because when I played, my assistant coaches used to always try to motivate me, and they would say like the opposing player, like their best player, he's gonna gangster you. And then when I got to Georgia State, Mike Perry used to use it all the time. Oh, he's a gangster. So I kind of implemented it into my scouting reports. When, you know, I want to challenge kids, you know, I would say, hey man, such and such, number 34 is a gangster. And the players automatic know, okay, their antennas go up. And they like, okay, all right, we're gonna pay attention. We get you, coach. We get you. You know, so gangster.
Like that. Gangster. What's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
When I first went to work for Sonny Smith, we were sitting in Hilton Hotel in Teaneck, New Jersey, and we were having dinner, just me and him. And he told me, he said, "Coach, in this business, if you want to last in this business, it's all about loyalty. And the more loyal you are, the longevity you have." And it always stick with me. You know, any head coach that I work for, to this day, I still talk to them, and I've always been loyal to any head coach that I work for.
Awesome. Sonny Smith, great words right there.
Yep.
Where's your happy place?
When I win a scout. That's my happy place, because then I come home and I'm not dejected. You know, I'm feeling good about myself, and, you know, feeling good. And my wife knows, like, when I come home from winning the scout, that I'm gonna be happy, and, you know, everything, you know, everybody's gonna be okay. I'm not gonna be snapping at people. When I lose, I go down into the basement and, you know, I watch the game, and I look back and say, well, you know, take notes. Hey, I should have done this, or, you know, we should have done this as a team. But when we win, I'm happy, and I don't watch the games, to be honest.
If you had to choose 3 adjectives to describe yourself, which would you choose?
Ambitious, humble, and tough.
Like that. 3 good ones. I like them. And this would be interesting. Like, what person or you can either one or event has the most influence on your life?
my mom probably has the most influence in my life, because she was a single mom raising me in Washington, D.C., and she never let me, she never allowed me to stir over in the other life. Everything was straight. She was like a Kostapa to me, and she helped me develop me into what I am today because, one, she made me be on time for everything. Two, she always talked about, present yourself well everywhere you go, be clean, be sharp. And then three, she always talked about respect everybody, respect your elders. I mean, that's what she talked about as a kid.
Awesome. I'm gonna ask you this because, I haven't had anybody who's been on 25 plus years yet, but people don't realize like this business can drain you. Like a lot of us always say, man, I've never worked. This has been my passion, so it doesn't feel like a job. But like, what still energizes you and brings you excitement?
To see the kids successful. When those kids are successful, and I feel like I'm a part of their life, because if you look back, like if you look at my Facebook, Twitter, I still reach out to every kid that's ever played for me or come through the program. I try to follow those kids because when we bring them to these universities, they become a part of your family. And I genuinely want to see these kids be successful in life, because somebody saw me and they helped me become successful. It just wasn't one person. It was a village to help me, to get me out of Washington, D.C., because as growing up in the Washington, D.C. area, like the street that I grew up on, I was the only one to make it out of that street.
Wow.
Everybody else is either in jail or dead. And it was probably out of 15 guys, we were all, 2 or 3 years away from each other. And I'm the only one that's ever made it out.
Wow. That's deep, man.
Yep.
That's deep.
And that's why going back to your last question, I said my mom, because my mom was really strict on me. She helped pave the way because she knew what I had.
Wow. So, knowing what you know now, what would you tell your young self to prepare for as an assistant coach?
If I had to do it all over again, I would probably develop relationships with, develop better relationship with administration. I never took the time out to develop the relationship with the folks in administration at my particular schools. So that's the one thing that I regret, and I would tell any young person, develop those relationships, because you never know which person is going to become an athletic director.
So true. So true. Well, Chris, I want to thank you again, man, for being a guest on the show and being unmasked. Is there anything you want to say to the viewers before we log off?
I tell you what, man, you got something here. I think you got a good thing here, and we're praying for you, brother. We want to see our brothers successful, and we're gonna support you in whatever you do. But this is a great thing for young, especially minorities, but all assistant coaches.
Thank you. I appreciate that, man. So right. Thank you, viewers, for watching another great show. Stay tuned for the next guest as we get them unmasked. See you next time, and stay safe.
Thank you again.